late. It's 9 o'clock, so I want to be respectful of our parents who are taking the time out of their busy day to join us today and get started on time. So good morning and welcome to our first webinar for the Fall Parent Education Series. My name is Dr. Trista Ramirez, and I'm the coordinator of student mental health and support here in PBPUSD. And we're very excited to be presenting these parent sessions to you in partnership with South Bay Families Connected. This has really been a work together with them to bring Dr. Mo Gilbert here for a 3-part series. Today, we're going to be discussing managing the emotions of distance learning with a talk with Dr. Gilbert, followed by a short Q&A session from questions that were submitted from our PBPUSD community prior to starting this event. At this time, I would like to introduce our speaker for the series, Dr. Mo Gilbert. I've had the privilege of working with Dr. Gilbert for many, many years while I've been here in PBPUSD. I've seen him speak many times to our parent community, and he always offers just wonderful, timely advice to our parents. He has been a clinical psychologist for over 45 years in practice in our South Bay community. He serves as the Director of Behavioral Health at Torrance Memorial Hospital, as well as the Executive Director and founder of the Thelma McMillan Recovery Center. Thank you, Dr. Gilbert, for joining us today as a parent of 2 teenagers who's experiencing her own emotions about what it means to be parenting during this health crisis. And while my kids are at home distance learning, I, like the parents watching this right now, I'm very excited to hear what you have to share with us on how we can help our students and our families really manage through this time in a healthy and productive way. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. I'm going to turn the presentation over to you. And when you wrap up, we will come back on and start some Q&A from our families and caregivers. So thank you, Dr. Gilbert, for being here this morning.
Thank you, and good morning to everybody. Good morning to this talk called Managing Emotions of Distance Learning, or what I call Welcome to the New Normal. I'm really grateful to be here. I'm honored that you've chosen to take your valuable time to attend, and what that does for me, I feel a certain significant responsibility to make sure that you get valuable, meaningful, and practical information when you leave here. I want to give a great shout out and thank you to Dr. Trista Ramirez, who I've worked with, as she said, for many years. I'm so impressed, and everybody in the district is so lucky to have her in charge of the wellness, the emotional wellness program. And I also want to thank Laura McIntyre of South Bay Families Connected and all the work they do, including putting these talks on. So as Tristan said, I'm Dr. Mo Gilbert, the Executive Director of the Thelma McMillan Center, and I'm the Director of Behavioral Health at Torrance Memorial Hospital, practicing in the community for 45 years. But probably most important, I'm in terms of what we're all going through, I'm a parent of 2, although my children are grown. I also am a grandparent of 2 children who are dealing with the same kinds of things I'm sure many and most of you are dealing with. None of us have ever experienced times like this, obviously. We have, of course, COVID, we have civil unrest, we have tremendously stressful elections, schools are closed, fires are going on. I mean, sometimes people describe it as, the world coming to an end almost. And for our children, our kids have to deal with stresses of distance learning, not being involved in their sports, their clubs, theater, not seeing their friends, fear of the future, fear of health, fear of their health, fear of their parents' health, their grandparents' health, what's going to happen when they get ready to go to college, and all kinds of things that, again, they never had to deal with. So I'm going to very briefly address what you already know, which is, what are you going through? And as I say, it'll be brief because for the most part, you don't need me to tell you what you're experiencing. Mostly what I'd like to do is, as I say, offer some advice and hear from some of you and hear from how you're handling your emotions, how you're doing. This talk is entitled Managing Emotions of Distance Learning. And when I thought about it, I said, whose emotions are we actually trying to help and manage? Is it the parents' emotions or is it our kids? And the reality is, of course, it is both. And much of what I'm speaking about will be appropriate for both. So again, want to hear from all of you, and we've got some great questions at the end. But most important, the issue is, how can you and your family grow through this time? So I'm going to start at the end. I'm going to tell you what we're going to hopefully achieve. What do I hope you take away? I want you to know that we can thrive through this period, not just survive. That we can grow, not just shrink or stand still. That we can be stronger, not weaker, and that we are much more resilient than many of us believe we are. So with that, as I said, just a few moments to identify what we and our children are going through. We have the highest rates of anxiety and depression and suicidal thought that there's been in a long, long time. Mental health providers in this and other communities are jammed. Their offices are packed. People are seeking help at greater frequency than I've ever seen. We have extremely high rates of alcohol and substance abuse, adults and teenagers as well. We have a teen program at Torrance Memorial Hospital at the McMillan Recovery Center. We are as busy as we've ever been in the 20 years or so that we've had our teen program. And interestingly, our teenagers in our program are doing incredibly well, better than they've ever done. Our program is completely virtual and distance through Zoom. But it's really, I was frightened when we first started back in March, and incredibly surprised and thrilled at how well our kids are doing in our program. The other day, I read a new psychological term, Coronaphobia, and this is a specific legitimate term coined in one of the journals. And it's the fear and emotional and social strain which the general public experiences. And what we need to recognize is our normal coping mechanisms are either gone or reduced. And we used to go to the gym, get together with friends, go to a bar and have a beer, go on vacation, go to restaurants. All those things that are stress reducers and stress coping mechanisms are suddenly gone. And replaced for many with obsessive compulsive disorder, distress, avoidance, panic, anxiety, hoarding, paranoia, depression. And what's important is these reactions are normal, and most people are experiencing some degree of it. It's on a continuum. And for some, however, it's more dysfunctional than others, and those are people who probably need to pay more attention and sometimes even get some professional help. Interestingly, a study by the American Psychological Association showed that parents have a higher degree of stress than adults who don't have kids. And what are they worried about? Education, providing basic needs, access to health care, missing out on major milestones for their kids. And what we need to understand is, there's this tremendous fear of where are things going. Every day we listen to the news. Well, some of us, I listen to the news way too much. But, anxiety is a result of fear of the unknown. And the more we don't know how things will turn out, the more our anxiety rises. So with all that, how can we cope? What are some tools that we can hopefully, as I say, think about, develop, and hopefully learn through this brief discussion today? First, as an overall issue, and this is for many people difficult to understand, I believe it's really important to embrace the moment rather than wish it away. We have to really, as I say, embrace what's going on. This is a learning time in our lives. It's not a time, many people say, I wish this would end. I wish this would go away. I can't wait till next year. And in a way, when that happens, we're sort of wishing our lives away, and we're missing out on certain opportunities of growth and of strengthening and of resilience building. And the other day I spoke to a friend of mine. I hadn't spoken to him since this all started in March. He's the chief of psychiatry at Cedars-Sinai. I said, how are you doing? And he said, well, it's hard, but we're thriving. My family, my 3 kids and I are doing really well. There are so many things we're doing and so many experiences we're having that I never could have done if this were not going on. And I was sort of taken in the sense of, it was a reminder to me of what I thought I already knew, but it was really clear how there are opportunities in this. And again, if we don't wish our life away and don't hope things end, that we can learn through this experience. So we need to acknowledge our fears, our concerns, our loss, our sadness, and all those negative thoughts we have. Now, I'm not saying we should give in, that we should surrender. That is not at all what I'm proposing. But I'm saying we need to have a healthy respect for what we're going through. You know, one day, I was thinking about this, we're going to look back at this, and this is going to obviously, and of course, be a major, major event in our lives. Now, if you look at people who have gone through the Depression, which was actually almost 190 years ago, practically, 1920, late 20s, people who went through it are still talk about it, and they still have behaviors related to going through that depression. They may hoard, you know, watch their pennies and be afraid of spending and afraid of, you know, making sure they have food on the table and not waste and certain things like that. And I know lots of people who are certainly wealthy, for example, today, but went through the Depression and still have lots of lingering remnants of it. And we're going to have that in this. Years from now, we're going to remember how we went through the COVID pandemic. So acceptance and acknowledgement is the first step in making some changes rather than denial. You know, I use the metaphor, and again, not to be too corny or something, but life is like going down a stream and in a raft. And sometimes the stream is pleasant, but sometimes you go through rough waters. And what we need to learn to do is negotiate going through that stream, both the nice parts and the difficult parts. We can't ever try to jump off the raft and swim upstream because we'll drown if we do that. So we have to learn to go with the flow, to navigate the dangers as we go. And from each of those dangers that we go through, we are better prepared for the next turn of events. And we know that at some point in that river journey, we will come out in a calm place. And that's the same thing that's going to happen here. So one thing we need to know is, I'm going to get into some of the specific tools now that hopefully will help you with some of this. One is we need to know the connection between thinking and feeling. So it's something I lecture quite a bit about, and I think is totally essential. Your feelings, our feelings, are always correct. They're never incorrect. They're never wrong. So for example, if your child says, "I'm sad," you cannot say, "No, you're not." What we feel is always correct. We feel anxiety, fear, sadness, depression, etc., especially during this time. However, what's important to understand is our feelings are controlled by our thinking. And sometimes our thinking is distorted. Sometimes it's based on history that we have that influences it. Sometimes it's based on incorrect information. So what we can do is we can learn and work on changing our thinking. And if we can change how we think about things, we can change how we feel. You know, it's the proverbial, the glass is half empty versus the glass is half full. The thing I've always been fascinated by in that example is, in order to feel differently about the amount of water in the glass, none of the water in the glass has to change. If I see it as half empty, I'm going to be unhappy. If I see it as half full, I'm going to feel better. And again, the glass itself doesn't have to change. What changes is how I think about it. And so we need to learn how to be realistic, how to avoid black and white thinking, all or none thinking, and replace it with gray kinds of thinking. So for example, if somebody says, "This is the worst day I've ever had in my life," that's black and white thinking. And we need to learn, and if somebody thinks that, their feeling is going to be sadness, depression, unhappiness. If we can look at that and say, well, look, there are other days you've had that are almost as bad, and you'll get through this day, and it's not as bad as it could be. And, you know, different kinds of sort of diluting that black and white thinking. If somebody can understand that, then their feelings begin to change. So thinking and feeling are really essential tools, and learning how to change negative thinking into realistic, hear me, realistic, not Pollyanna-ish positive thinking. So let's see what some of the tools are for doing some of that. I work very much with people, and I teach them the difference between what is and what if. If you're stuck in what if, you're going to be what we call catastrophizing. In other words, what if this happens to me? What if we get sick? What if I lose my job? If I lose my job, what if I can't pay my bills? If I can't pay my bills, what if I lose my house? What if my family leaves? You know, we go down that road, and where was it going to lead us? That kind of catastrophizing leads us to serious feelings of fear, stress, anxiety, and so on. And I ask people instead to change what if to what is. And what is means what's happening in the here and now, in the present. And through that, we get another tool, which is we can control the things we can and let go of the things we have no control over. And whenever there's a stressful situation, I do this myself, and I, again, work with people, I ask them, take a look, take a breath, reflect, and what is it that is in your control and what is not in your control? The things that you worry about that are not in your control will cause tremendous anxiety and depression. The things that are in your control, you can begin to, in the here and now, in the present, try to do something about. And you begin to get a feeling of control, empowerment, strength. So it's really important when you're feeling stressed to ask yourself, what about this am I in control of and what am I not? Let me let go of the things I'm not in control of and let me focus on the things I have control over. Excuse me. Another tool for getting where we need to get is communication. And again, everybody always talks about communication, but you know what? Everybody's always correct. We need to learn to communicate well. I'm going to stick to a particular part of communicating, which I call validating feelings. It is essential to learn to validate your partner's feelings, your spouse's feelings, and your children's feelings. And what that means is we listen to what somebody says. Remember what I said earlier, how somebody feels is always correct. And we, as I say, listen and we hear what they're saying and we think, where are they coming from? And we then can reflect back to them that we understand what they're feeling. We don't have to agree with what they're feeling. So again, let's take a child who says, I'm really scared about what's going to happen without going to school on a regular basis. What parents, and I've been there many times, we say we want to make our kids feel good, so we'll say to them, oh, don't be afraid, it'll be okay. And it's very well-meaning. We don't want them to suffer, but in a sense, we're invalidating their feelings. And what we need to be able to do is hear them and ask them, what are you afraid of? And they'll tell us, and we say, I understand, it makes sense that you're afraid. If you think that you're never going to be able to go to college because of the school situation, I don't blame you for being afraid. Am I agreeing with them? No. What I'm doing is building a bridge through validating their feelings. And now we can then begin talking the next step and begin exploring what some options are or different ways to think. So again, validating feelings is not agreeing, but it's an essential skill. You know, as I said earlier, our coping mechanisms are largely gone, and we need to replace them with intimate, meaningful conversation and communication, especially for those who are spending so much time under the same roof. Communication of meaning makes a huge difference. Another tool, acknowledge your level of concern. And what I mean by that is, it's okay to be afraid. It's okay, back to validating your own feelings. And it's important that you honor your own beliefs, honor your opinions, and not judge yours or judge others. And in this, again, very climate of disagreement in our society, and whether it's about politics, but it's also about the pandemic. You know, neighbors argue with neighbors about wearing masks. Neighbors argue with neighbors about, well, my kid should go to school or shouldn't go to school, or it's okay with me if my kids' friends come over. And again, the issue really is, one, we need to not judge others' feelings, others' opinions. At the same time, we need to own our own and not feel guilty or feel like we need to change our feelings or our behaviors or our thinking because what somebody else wants. So basically being non-judgmental, but also respecting your own thoughts. It's important to get support. It's important to find trusted support. And back again to communication and feelings. Find people you can speak to openly, honestly, and share what you're going through. And for those that are on the end of the continuum where their suffering is a little more dysfunctional, then it's important to go get professional help. And again, as I said, nothing to be, it's not a stigma, it's not something to be ashamed of if you need someone to help you get through some of these difficult times. Another issue, another tool is maintaining routines. Very important to maintain routines. It's a little easier now, a little bit with school in session, even with distance learning. During the summer, I saw so many painful and difficult issues going on in families where kids would stay up till 2, 3 in the middle of the morning, I guess, playing video games and chatting and doing things with their friends, and then they'd sleep till 2, 3 in the morning, and then they'd do the cycle again. What is really important for not just your children, but for yourself is to maintain routines and have schedules and get up at certain times and get dressed and get ready to go. And again, it brings a sense of normalcy to what's occurring. Screen time is part of that routine. We just, I run a parent chat for the South Bay Families Connected, and we just had a really good discussion on screen time and how important it was to figure out how to help your children shut off their phones at a certain time. And it involves limit setting and rule setting, and even having, somebody had a great idea, they had in their home a common charging spot in their house where everybody, and I say everybody, and I'm going to get to that in a moment when I talk about modeling, but everybody takes their phones, plugs them in, and leaves them alone. They're not at bedside, they're not with them 24/7. So again, maintaining routines is important, and having a plan is important. I call it having a blueprint. You wouldn't get on a sailboat and push it out into the water and just hope that the wind takes you to a good spot. You generally have a map, and you map out your course. And that's what we need to do with our days. Doesn't mean it's set in cement. We can change it, we can adjust it, but we need to have an idea and a plan. How do you motivate your kids during this distance learning? Another question I've been asked a lot by parents. One is, back again to this word that is so essential, and that's communicate. You need to talk with them and find out, what are they thinking, what are they feeling, how are they experiencing what they're going through. You need to, at that time, as I say, listen, reflectively listen, validate their feelings. I think it's really important to involve your kids in decision making rather than just impose things on them. Let them be part of the decision making in terms of their schedules, in terms of their homework, in terms of their, the way they spend their time. And if they have a hand in it, they're much more likely to follow through. If you don't like what they say, you don't like their opinions, you can continue to shape it to get to a place where you're comfortable, but it's just important to include them in that. It's important to avoid unhealthy habits. Think of STEM: sleep, think, eat, and move. So let's start with sleep. Sleep is essential, we know that. Sleep for kids is really important. They need 8 to 10 hours of sleep. At puberty, their sleep cycle starts to change, and they are not tired as early as they used to be, and they are tired usually about 2 hours later. But they still, so if they go to sleep at 10 or 11, they still need to get a good amount of sleep, which if they're at school in the morning is difficult. But as much as possible, they need a routine that allows them to have essential good sleep and not getting up too early in the morning or going to sleep too late at night. Eat, make sure everybody's eating healthy, nutritionally, and regularly. Think is what we've been talking about in terms of changing our thinking, looking at how our feeling is affected by our thoughts. And then movement basically means some form of physical exercise. And exercise could be taking a walk in the neighborhood. It could be setting up a home gym. It could be whatever it is that works, but you need to get out and move. reducing the use of substances to cope. Now, of course, your children shouldn't be using any substances, but I'm really talking about parents. And learning mindfulness and meditation skills. And sometimes it's as easy as getting an app on your phone through Calm or I forgot the other one right now, but there's two really major ones that are great. I use Calm myself. I think the most important thing in healthy and unhealthy habits is modeling. I think it's important for you to remember your kids will watch what you do, and it's much more important what you do than what you say. If you're using alcohol as a way to relax and tell them it's not good to drink, they're not going to hear that message. If you're telling them put away your cell phones, don't use them, and you're on your cell phone or on your computer, through the night, then they're not going to hear the message that you tell them. They're going to watch your behavior. So it's really important to model healthy behavior. Two more things, really. One is really important, which is we need to learn and we need to practice gratitude. Psychological research has shown that having gratitude allows people to feel much happier, and a sense of gratitude. And I work with people to have a gratitude list and make a gratitude list every day. And just take a look at the things in one's life that you're grateful for. Again, I think it's essential to keep that kind of list. And then finally, remember that we hear a lot about social distance, but social distance is not the same as social isolation. And in fact, research has shown if they change the word to physical distance, it actually improves mood. So we're really not trying to socially distance from people, we're trying to physically distance. And in that, we're trying to find innovative ways to connect and reach out. And we're afforded the great opportunity of social media platforms to do that, as well as letter writing and phone calls and drive-bys. And again, I've seen parents with lots of innovative ways to do that. So in summary, let me just say, embrace the moment, live in the here and now, control the things you can and let go of the things you have no control over, lean on past successes, and practice gratitude. In AA, and as the director of the Thelma McMillan Center, we work closely with the AA philosophy. Some of those slogans fit so perfectly for now. And one is, one day at a time, and this too shall pass. And I want to leave you with one final thing, and that's a parable or a metaphor that I love. It's just my favorite parable. When anything feels too overwhelming, or there's too much to do, or feel like we're never going to get over it, I think this kind of addresses it. So bear with me 2 minutes. Once upon a time, there was an old man who used to take a walk every morning on the beach. And then one day after a rain, he was taking his early morning walk, and he saw way down in the distance something, somebody was throwing something into the ocean. And as he got closer, he saw a little boy, and he said, "What are you doing?" And the boy said, "Well, after the storm last night, the storm washed thousands and tens of thousands of starfish on the ocean, on the beach. And in the morning, when the sun comes up, the sun's going to dry them out and they're all going to die. So I'm picking them up and I'm throwing them back in the ocean." And the man says, "Son, you know that there's probably 1 million of those? You're really not going to make much of a difference, much of a dent in this." And the boy bent down, he picked up one starfish and he threw it into the ocean. He said, "You know what? I made a difference to that starfish." So never feel like it's too overwhelming. There's always something we can do. And with that, I thank you for listening. And Trista?
That's great. Thank you. So many great tips and tools for our parents to be able to use during this time, Mo, which you and I have talked a lot about. I think it's always important when we have these kinds of conversations with our families that they have some tips to be able to use to be able to support their kids during this time, but also for them as families. It's a tough time for families for sure. And we're all kind of in the same space together all day long sometimes. So to be able to manage those things, You talked about so many things that were already some of the questions that had come up, but I do want to touch a little bit on the importance of friendships for our kids and kind of how parents can support the needs of friendships and peer relationships when kids are in this distance learning environment. And I know it's tough to be able to do that as parents, but could you talk a little bit about the importance of those relationships for our kids and maybe some ways that parents can be fostering
Sure.
that?
Well, I'll address it in two ways, and I tried touching a little bit on some of that, but uh, as I said, first of all, we're social beings. We are social animals, and we need people. We need people around us in order to be okay emotionally. And of course, you know, what we're going through is what is putting a dent in that. And one area of concern, which again, these are things I hear with people I work with. There are different beliefs in this, and as I said in my presentation, there are some families and parents who have little gatherings in their backyard, and your child may come home and go, hey, I want to go over so and so's, and you say, well, no, it's not safe, we can't do that, I heard about they don't wear masks and so on. And now your child is upset and concerned. So one thing is to not, as I said earlier, we can't judge what other people are doing. That's not the same as not taking care of ourselves. So we need to be able to say, well, Mrs. Jones is willing to do that, and if that's what they want to do, that's okay. I don't have to enter into it, and I don't have to feel guilty about what's important for me. So we need to find, again, this is again stating the obvious, I believe, but find healthy, what works for us. I say healthy, for me it would be healthy, but what works for us, ways to make sure we're connecting and make sure we are letting our kids have some kind of contact, but within the frame of safety that we feel good about, and then be able to, again, communicate with our children and let them understand what we're thinking, what we're feeling. And, again, I'm sort of weaving everything I spoke about, and then validate how they feel. And when
Yeah.
they say, I'm really angry at you for not letting me go to Joey's house, you can validate and say, I understand. I don't blame you for being angry. And if I were you, I'd be angry too if somebody didn't let me do the things I wanted to do. But, and you go and explain what's important, and then what can we do? How can we do some of that? And then you get to whatever your level of comfort is. And again, we've all seen, this is one of the unfortunate parts of this kind of presentation. We don't have interaction, because I'm sure everybody in the audience has some great tools and great ways to do this, and have experiences that I've never even thought of. But, whether it's driving by and again, all the social media and all the ways in which we can be true to our own needs and true to our own limits and boundaries, and yet at the same time address those kinds of issues.
Well, and I think what you're saying there is so valuable too, that as a family, you have to talk about with your kids where your own values and boundaries lie. And that's not a judgment on the other family. And that's a lot of some of the questions that came up from our parents is how do you do that? And I think what I'm hearing you say is it's really a matter of having those honest dialogues and conversations with your kids while not providing, pushing judgment on another family, that every family has different reasons while they're making choices, and really talking that through with your kids.
Exactly. But I do want to say one thing. And again, it's not just your kids. I have this in my own family when we try to, I think on the continuum, I'm pretty safe, or my limits are pretty strict. But I have my kids and grandkids over, only on the outside, blah, and they stay in the yard. But we still have arguments. And how come I have to wear the mask? I'm 12 feet apart, and the point is really, I can't control what you do. And if you don't think that's important, that's fine. You just can't be here and do it. So we can control our own homes. We can control our own environments. We can't control what other people do.
Mhm.
But we do have the ability to say, I understand, and you need to do that, but it doesn't work for me here.
Yeah.
But if I come to your house, I have to live by your rules. But then I have control whether I go to your house or not.
Yeah, absolutely. You talked a little bit about modeling for parents and kind of what that looks like. And sometimes as parents, modeling that self-care during this time is difficult. How do we prioritize that? Because I do think that there's a lot of value around like the impact of modeling self-care and also helping our kids understand self-care, because that does have an impact on their learning and their overall well-being. So you maybe talk a little bit about some of those strategies as adults that we can use, and then how we can sometimes it's hard to get a teenager to, they hear the word self-care and they're like, So how do we get them to understand the importance of that and the impact on their learning and their overall well-being?
Okay. Well, in part, I'm repeating what you said. I'm really a huge proponent of modeling. So so part of the question is, how do we get ourselves to do that?
Mhm.
And I think we have to reflect, we have to think, we have to recognize that there are things we need to sometimes do that are not don't feel the best in the moment. I call it. I had a part of the presentation that I would have used. Maybe we'll do it the next one, but delayed versus instant gratification.
Mhm.
And as adults, we sometimes need to have the ability to control and learn that we need to have what we call delayed gratification, meaning I'm going to do something now that I may not really want to do, or I may not like, but I know that in the future it's going to pay off for me. So maybe I don't want to go out and take a run for a mile, but and it's much easier to sit back, have a beer, and watch TV. But I'm not going to. I have to force myself to do something that will be good for me in the future, rather than instantly gratify my needs at the moment. And again, I think if our kids see that, it's so much more powerful. And I don't mean just exercising. If our kids see us living healthy, making healthy choices, it's, by the way, just so nobody walks away and goes, I do all that and my kids still don't. This is not a one-to-one ratio. In other words, if you do everything, that doesn't mean your child's going to go, oh, great, my mom's doing it, so I think I will. It may not happen at all. But that's just one of the tools we have.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we've covered almost all of the questions that we have here. I really appreciate the talk and the tools and the tips you've given our parents today.
Thank you for the having me and for the opportunity. And I just wish everybody gets through this well, and I know you will. And as I said, this will pass, and one day we won't be back to normal, but we'll have our new normal to move forward on to.
So our next Parent Ed series with Dr. Gilbert is on November 4th, again at 9 a.m. Same format, we'll be live streaming and have an opportunity for parents to provide us with questions in advance. Our topic for our next month's meeting will be teenagers and stress and anxiety, and how parents can go ahead and support their kids through that time. I do want to give a plug for the fact that South Bay Families Connected is a wonderful resource that is available to our PVPUSD community. We are a partner school with South Bay's Families Connected, and they have just a wealth of curated resources and information available to our parents on a wide variety of topics, including how to work with and support your kids during this health crisis. They actually just started a really great new virtual calming space for teenagers that's curated all by local South Bay teenagers. So just a wonderful resource for our parent community that they can access. And I did also want to make a plug for our own counselors and mental health SAGE therapists that we have on our 612 campuses, and our school psychologists at our elementary schools. We do have a wealth of resources available for our kids if they are experiencing any kind of stress or difficulty engaging in the learning process during distance right now, or even with kind of managing their own emotions. We do have a lot of resources out there for our families, for kids to be able to access. So parents can reach out to their school team to ask for support if that's something that they need right now. So please do make sure you're accessing those resources that we have available. So Dr. Gelbart, thank you again for your time
Thank you.
and always being a wealth of information for our community. I greatly appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Everybody
Yeah.
take care.
Great. We'll see you guys next month.
Bye now.
Bye-bye.